Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Faith Greater Than Fear. These are opportunities that we have to come up and close with people who love Jesus and who are following him with themselves, their ministries, their families. And today I have a great friend, Ben Thornley, with me. Ben, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Ben, tell our audience where you're at. I'm dressed a little warm. You're dressed a little warm. And where are you at and what's happening?
Yeah, so I'm here in Louisville, Kentucky, at a church called Southeast Christian Church, and I work in the missions department. I've been here, gosh, it'll be 17 years this year. So yeah, I get to work with partners all around the world, all around our country, as well as some stuff locally here too. So I love it, and GNPI is one of our partners that we love working with. So. You guys just do such a great job.
Well, thanks. So tell us, you got a remarkable wife. She's doing a lot of great stuff. How do you balance as a family who are people of faith, but we're in a pandemic still? How have you learned to balance life as husband, wife, student, minister, dad, mom? How's that going?
It's tough. It's one of those seasons where it's been challenging. The word balance doesn't always seem to fit our life. You mentioned it. My wife, Lindsay, she's working on her master's in marriage and family therapy, and she's doing a lot of therapy hours for that master's. And then it was going well, and then our kids came home, from school. We have 3 kids, and so all of a sudden you thrust kind of homeschooling and or NTI into that. It became pretty chaotic. We feel like many days we feel like we're just juggling. She'll say, "Oh, I have this session here, and I have this meeting here, so I'll come home and watch them while you go do this." So in a lot of ways, it just feels like a big juggling act for us. But I had a deacon one time when I was doing college ministry early on. One of the things that he kind of coached me on is he said, try to find balance in the smallest kind of segment you can of life, right? Like some days you can get balance in a day and have a good balanced day. But when you don't have a balanced day, try to balance out your week, right? Like if you have some crazy days in a week, then try to balance it out by having some slower days. And he said, some weeks are just going to get out of control. So then try to balance your month, and just say, hey, these weeks are super intense and you just know it, they're going to be. So then make sure that you find balance somewhere else in that month. And he says, and if you ever get past a month, you're doing something wrong and you need to check yourself. So there's definitely been times where there's been weeks as a whole that we're just like, there was no balance that week. But then we just kind of look each other in the eye and say, okay, how can we find balance the rest of this month? Are there days we can take off? Are there some long weekends that we can take where we can just get away or something? But really trying to be diligent with that. And like I said, it's harder than usual to find that balance, but we're just trying to be as intentional as we can.
I like those words, and it kind of expresses the principle of the Sabbath, so that sabbatical, that idea of pulling away and reflecting and having a rest, some way, some creative option. And I think, no, tell me a little bit what you see, but I think the pandemic has caused a lot of imbalanced areas, a lot of disruption, but there are some areas, and where would you say are some areas where there's been some rest? Yeah. Incorporated in your desire to find balance?
Yeah. Well, again, 3 kids. So anyone that's had kids that are involved with extracurricular activities understand this. But on any given week, we were going to soccer practice and gymnastics and trombone, recitals, and just like anything you can imagine, to where there were weeks where just about every night we're out at something, a Bible study in someone's home or a sporting event. So almost overnight that just kind of shut down. Right. So in a lot of ways, it's slowed down our family to just kind of be around each other and interact with each other in other ways besides just, hey, we're in a car going to this thing or going to that thing. And those things aren't necessarily bad, but um, just having that time as a family at home, and the weekends not having, big sporting events or tournaments or whatever, has been really kind of a sweet time for us too as a family.
That's a good point. Let's move from the family side. Let's get out of your walls of the home. And you told us earlier what your official role is there at Southeast. Unpack a little bit of what that means in your role, both in the city of Louisville and maybe nationally a bit. And then, of course, for our audience, we'll go then to the international side a little bit later. So start about your role and what you're doing in Greater Louisville. And what does Ben Thornley get to do in his days?
Yeah. Well, so when the pandemic first kind of started shutting things down, we started kind of hearing, okay, everyone's staying home, and we started just hearing people say, oh, they have all this free time and they don't know what to do with it. And for me and for much of our mission staff, it was the opposite, because as soon as things shut down, the needs in our community just skyrocketed, right? I mean, the number of single moms that were working jobs that they couldn't get to, or they had to go to work, but they had kids at home, or the food insecurity in our city just skyrocketed. I mean, literally almost overnight. And then there were medical needs where our hospitals couldn't get the PPEs they needed. And so we just kind of kicked into gear and just started saying, okay, what does it look like for a church to love its community in the middle of a pandemic? And in our lifetime, we hadn't faced anything like this. We didn't really have some playbook that we had done before. So we just started listening to the community and really trying to figure out what the community was saying. And that the things I mentioned were a lot of what we were hearing, is just how difficult it was. And then coupled with, there was just a lot of fear, right? Even within our own congregation, especially early on, when people didn't really understand what was happening and how bad it was, or do these masks even work? Like we don't even know hardly anything about this pandemic. So it was really hard to connect some of those dots, right? To see the community that's in need, and to have this congregation with people that, image bearers of Christ, with the Holy Spirit indwelling them, who are called to love hurting people. How do we connect those dots? So early on, it was a challenge. But we did food drives, and it was one of our most successful food drives, where we just like, hey, just pull up, pop your trunk. We'll get all this stuff out, and we're sanitizing everything that got delivered. I mean, we had stories of people literally going to Kroger and filling shopping carts full of food, just cans. And in one case specifically, I love the story because the manager came over and was upset with this guy that was buying all this food, because he thought he was hoarding it, and when he said what he was doing, the manager's like, oh, okay, no, you can get more and we'll give you a discount, and go get some of this too. And it was like even more helpful. So our congregation really started to get the vision, really started to jump in on some of these. We did a PPE drive where we're just like, hey, we know there's doctors and clinics that were closed. Some of different types of clinics were closed that maybe had some masks and or sanitizer or any number of things. And we just said, hey, if you guys have any of those in your companies, like painters even had masks, we're just like, anything that you have, just bring it in. And we were just astounded by the number of just donations that we were able to take to our hospitals. And so that was super fun. Kind of early on to just be part of this. We did one where we started taking meals to ER workers, like emergency workers and hospital workers, as they're, again, putting their lives at risk, literally on the front lines. So we just started this thing, hey, donate a meal, this much money will donate a meal and you can actually go deliver it. So we're coordinating across all of our campuses. And so it was a lot of work early on just to go from 0 to 100 with all these different initiatives in such a short period of time. But our church really responded well and really engaged really well, I think, in the middle of it.
Some great stories, Ben. And isn't it true? I mean, in serious times, the church, big C, church, can really show up in her community. And you've given great several illustrations, and I can't imagine with the congregation the size of Southeast, the logistics that you had to work with people, and had to lean on not only your paid staff but a lot of volunteers as well. And great stories. So what do you see as the kind of ER response mechanisms that you did, food and masks and whatever? What do you think will stay? What lessons, first from the international community reach side of things, do you think these are things that we as a community, as a Southeast, as a church, we're going to do them even after we're done with the pandemic? We've learned some things.
Mhm.
What
Yeah.
lessons do you see being learned?
I think we've always been a church that tries to listen to the community needs and figure out what the actual real needs are instead of just assuming them. But I think during this pandemic, it really solidified that some of our knee-jerk reactions weren't necessarily the right things. But when we actually listen, and I mean, everything from even just calling ministry partners around town and just really starting with learning on the front end and not just being reactive. I think that's one thing. I think another thing is just, I think we underestimated the power of just loving people in simple ways. There are countless stories. We actually have a thread on our Microsoft Teams thing at Southeast where people were just sharing stories throughout the whole thing of just people encountering people in their community across all campuses when they were either delivering a meal to a hospital or doing food deliveries to homes in different neighborhoods that we knew were in crisis. And the stories were just amazing of people saying, we always heard about Southeast and we always had this view of what the church is. But now when we meet a believer, we meet a Christian, and we see that you guys actually care, everything, all that's just kind of blown to bits, right? So the idea that loving people as Jesus did, it actually works, right? Like it actually draws people in to see Jesus for who he is and to see God for who he is, see his church here on earth for what it's supposed to be. It's just a beautiful thing. So like I said, I think there's going to be tons of new people in our church worshiping God because they first met a believer that was just caring about them, just loving them, just knocking on their door saying, hey, is there anything you need? Like, we're from the church down the street and we just want to make sure our community is okay in the middle of this. Like, that's huge.
Yeah. So the lessons learned are listen well, listen to your community, love well, and it works. I like it. Like it, Ben. Let's go from the city to our planet. This is a global pandemic. In your portfolio, you care deeply about your mission partners, and we can attest to that, as Southeast is fabulous with us at GNPI, but there's so many other orgs and so many other mission teams and families that you're caring for, both international in their origin as well as U.S. missionaries being sent. What are you noticing as we're now a year into this? What are you noticing as the residual things that are going to have to, first of all, be dealt with?
Yeah. I think one of the things that the global church needs to deal with in big terms is, I think one thing this pandemic really taught us globally is the ways of reaching people for Christ are far more than we had anticipated. And like the creativity that we've seen in a lot of partners, right? And missionaries just all around the world to say, okay, we're faced with a challenge. We still need to live on mission to bring people to the Lord, but we can't do it the same way we've always done it. Like, that way is off the table. So what do we do? And some of these new ways are far more effective than the old ways even. I mean, I could tell, sir, I don't know if we'll have time. There's so many stories from around the world of ministries just pivoting and just saying, well, we used to do this. Now we had one quick one that was one of my favorites. It's in Eastern Europe. They do a lot to reach youth, right? And they do camps, they do sports, they do all kinds of things. Everything that they do pretty much was off the table. So they said, well, I don't think God wants us just to take the year off. There's still lost people. So what are we going to do? So just shifting towards online stuff. One country leader just said, you know what, I'm going to start doing esports. I'm going to start an esport tournament online and just see if anyone comes. And their church in this country, it's in the Balkans. I forget exactly which country it is, but they have like 4 or 5 new believers that accepted Christ during a Devo on an online sporting event, just because they couldn't do real sports. They couldn't do camps. They couldn't do music. They couldn't do all the other stuff. So I think one awakening for the global church is seeing that there's far more ways of reaching people than we had imagined. And just the usual same old, we've done this for 50 years is not necessarily going to reach the people that haven't been reached yet. And we got to really think outside the box and come up with creative ways. I got so many other stories like that. That question excites me because I think moving forward, there's going to be just this awakening of the soul of the church saying, okay, what else can we do? What other ideas do we have? Like, what other tools do we have at our disposal to do it?
So the ability to be creative, and why shouldn't we be surprised? We are created by the most creative being ever, and that's our loving Father. I think we have a time for another story or two here as we begin to wrap up here. So tell us 1 or 2 more of creativity you've experienced internationally as a response to a pandemic and still being on mission for the Lord Jesus in reaching lost pre-followers of Jesus.
Okay, so this one was fun because we know the family that did this really, really well. My wife and I, Lindsay and I, led a trip to Croatia for several years, right? And when things shut down, similar, their church shut down, a lot of stuff shut down. And this ministry also works with youth primarily. So one of the things they said is, well, while we're shut down right now and we can't be in schools, we can't be doing the camps, we can't do a bunch of the stuff we were doing, let's just do some research. So they said they literally put out ads all over Facebook and Instagram, everywhere, saying we're going to pay anyone between the ages of 16 and 22, we'll pay you, like, I think it was 20 euros for this research and about what people in this country, what youth in this country believe about God. What do you think about God? Is there a God? Like all this stuff. And it was basically paying for a 3-hour conversation with people, right? And that was their heart in it early on, was just like, let's just do like a big research study, right? Since we have all this downtime. Well, the story ends up where they had more spiritual, like in-depth spiritual conversation with people right in their target, in their community than ever before. They said it was cheap compared to putting on these big events and big things that they had always done for years. They're like, and a lot of the kids didn't even take the money at the end because they would say, this was one of the best conversations I've ever had in my life. And scheduled follow-up calls and Zooms and agreed to meet for coffee or whatever. I mean, so it just blew them away as to like, why have we not done this before? Because people are just calling in saying, okay, yeah, I'm going to talk about God and what I think about God for 3 hours. And just the amount of conversation that opens with a young person, especially in the middle of a pandemic where they don't have a lot else to do. So the fruit of that one thing just blew the doors open in this ministry. And now they're looking back going saying, we're going to do this forever. Like, why would we stop doing this? Even after the pandemic, this is a great opportunity just to connect with people. So yeah, that's one of my favorites. I love hearing it.
I love it. Love it. So highlighting, and then what's your final thoughts, Ben? We're hearing you about, let's get balance in our own lives. Understand the pandemic is a gift from God in getting some element of Sabbath and sabbatical there. Mm-hmm. That locally, you guys have learned how to love deeply and listen well. Mm-hmm. And internationally, you've seen where people are much more creative and in some cases as effective as the old ways, maybe even more, and didn't cost the kingdom as many dollars in the meantime. In closing, because we're running out of time here, what words as a person of faith, a man I respect, you've got experience growing up interculturally, cross-culturally, have a business degree as well, and in missions. What advice would you give to our viewers as we still slodge into this pandemic into year 2?
I guess it's I would say it's what Kyle told our staff early on. Kyle Eidelman, our senior pastor, led beautifully through this, I think. But one of the things that he said is God has diverged our path off of what we had planned, right? And he said the worst thing we can do is just keep looking back at the old path and just say, I can't wait to get back on that path. I can't wait till things are normal. I can't wait till that. And just keep thinking about the way things were or they're going to be one day. He said, God has us on this new path. Find a way to be a blessing, find a way to minister, find a way to be Christ on this new path. If it goes back to the old path, that's great. But where are you right now? Where does God have you right now? And it happens to be in the middle of a pandemic. But that doesn't mean that we're just to shut down and just say, well, we're just going to hold on. I'm not going to minister to my neighbors. I'm not going to reach out to lost people. I'm not going to pray for until things go back to normal. Wherever he has us, be Christ there, be a minister there, do the best you can with where you are. And I think that call really set early on in our church, set our church on this course of just like, hey, things may never go back to normal the way they were, but it doesn't matter. That's not what we're longing for. We're just longing for new opportunities to reach lost people wherever God has us. So
great words, Ben Thornley from Southeast Christian Church, Louisville, Kentucky. Stay warm. Don't let things get too slippery out there. Appreciate you. Appreciate our collaboration partnership, the insights you shared today. Greetings to your family as well. To all of you, I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Mr. Ben Thornley. And if you did, there's probably others that would enjoy it as well. So share it with them on your social media channels. And we have a podcast version of this available as well. And you can always go to our website. So from Ben Thornley, myself, we want to wish you a wonderful day. And as one, hopefully with faith, may that faith be greater always than your fear. Amen. God's blessings. Bye-bye. Thanks, Ben.